Welcome to Dream and Do, a podcast for women who are chasing their dreams, rediscovering who they are, and are ready to make changes, big or small. I'm your host, Nicola Ray Wickham. Join me for confidence pep talks, soulful insights, and practical tips on all things creativity and wellness, along with powerful conversations with women who are dreaming and doing in action. This is the stuff you're going to wish you knew years ago, but don't worry, it's not too late. Let's get started. Hey loves, I'm excited. Today's episode is the very first Dream and Do conversation. So it's the first conversation I'm having with a woman that is dreaming and doing in action. And that woman is Jessica Huie MBE. It was such a pleasure to welcome Jessica onto the podcast. I have followed her for a number of years. I remember seeing something in the media about her just as I was starting my career in kind of PR and marketing, and she was absolutely flying in hers, and I always kind of looked up to her as an absolute inspiration, not knowing that roll forward to 2018, I would have a podcast and a platform and be inviting her to come and talk to me about her book, which has been published. By the time this episode goes out, it will be out and published on Hay House. And so it's really, really nice to talk to her about the inspiration for her book, how it came about, and go deeper into the content about it as well. I'm not going to give too much away because we go into all of this in our conversation, but I just want to say that the content of it was refreshing. The uniquely British perspective that she has on it is something that I hadn't seen in print like that from a book from kind of the self-development world before, and I really appreciated that, and I'm sure you will too. So let's dive in. So I'm so honoured and delighted to welcome Jessica Huie to the podcast today. It's actually we've just been discussing before we went live and I pressed record about the impact that Jessica's new book has had on me. And I'm just really pleased to be able to share with you guys in these launch few weeks of the book, Jessica's perspective on writing the book, how it came to be. And I'm not going to kind of put any spoilers in there, but any of the themes that have come up as well, we can just go a little bit deeper on them. So welcome, Jessica.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to have this chat. Yeah, I really am.
It's such an honour to have you. So obviously I know all about you, but do you just want to tell everyone just a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm an entrepreneur and now author. Purpose is my very first book, and it's published by Hay House. And it's out here and in America on the 24th of April. And it's called Purpose, Find Your Truth and Embrace Your Calling. And yeah, it's a little bit of a departure from my career spent in the media and launching colourblind cards, and certainly not the book that I expected to write, but it's turning out to be this wonderful adventure, which feels absolutely where I'm supposed to be.
The book, having read, I've managed to get through half of it in just the few days that I've had it, and it feels like a gift. It really does. It really, really does. So what was the book that you thought you would have done?
So I guess, and I don't want to spoil because I know you've only got halfway through, so I'm tiptoeing around what I should say, but when there was a moment where I thought, gosh, I'm going to write a book. The book that I should write is probably something along the lines of how to build an authentic personal brand, which would have lent itself to my career, And I thought I actually started, I wrote the book proposal along those lines and pitched to business publishers and was having those meetings and started to write. And it just, I had prior to that, I'd started to write in the last few days of my dad's life. And that was a real spontaneous, I picked up the back of an envelope and just started to scribble whatever wanted to come out of me. And when I read it back, it was beautiful. And it was almost as if it had come, in fact, it hadn't come from my head. It had come from somewhere much deeper. And as a result, I was moved by my own writing. And it was sort of beyond Jessica and her thinking mind. And so having got into this business mode when my head got back in the way, none of what I was producing had the same depth or sort of beauty or meaning that this previous piece of writing had. So I decided just to, throw in the towel, not going to, and just such shafted the business book idea and decided to write, what really wanted to come out of me at this time in my life. And that was purpose. And so Hay House was the natural fit.
Of course. So when you very first picked up that envelope to start writing, was it kind of journaling that you was doing, or was it just a stream of consciousness? What was it that you were doing?
Yeah, it was a stream of consciousness. It was 3:00 in the morning, and I'd been sort of the main carer for my dad, in this space, what happens when you're caring for somebody that you love at the end of their life is a bit like childbirth, in the sense that you're ejected from normal life. Like, you're not in that doing mode. Time stops. You don't know what time it is. You don't know what day it is. You're very present. And in the case with my dad, as much as it was incredibly painful, and really tested me, it tested me to the core because we were so close. There was also so much beauty in it, and so many revelations and memories that kind of came to the surface. And I was just in a completely different space to one I'd ever been in before. And from within that, there was all sorts of learning. And I think when I picked up the pen, it was cathartic. I just needed to get it out. And here we are.
Wow. And how did you find the book writing process?
I loved every minute of writing this book. In fact, that's not quite true. So I enjoyed less the stringing it together, the sort of, because there's this quite heavy editing process that's necessary. But the way I wrote it, because it was so organic and so pure, whenever I felt inspired or I had a thought, I just ran with it. And so at the end, it meant it needed to be sort of fit together. I didn't have this predisposed strategic book idea. And I'm glad I didn't, but it was quite a lot of, sort of forming to do at the end. But I've loved it. And so much so that, I've just started the next one because I just can't bear to not write. Yeah.
I was so going to ask you about the next one.
I don't know. I mean, it's not completely clear yet, but I know I won't stop writing. And the process has been like, falling in love again, finding that piece of yourself that you left behind, because I used to write as a kid. I was always good at it. So it's been like a bit of a return to me in that sense, and sort of stepping into a little bit more of who I am just through writing.
And you always knew that you had a book in you then? Yeah,
I guess I did, but it wasn't on my horizon. And just before my dad got ill, I'd really got to kind of burnout stage with my career. I was at this place where I think I've burnt out a couple of times, to be honest, but I've just ploughed through over the years. But this time I was just in this kind of apathetic, I didn't have the same passion. I knew I needed something new, but I had no idea what that was going to be, and was really uncomfortable about that. Was quite fearful because it's so out of comfort zone. So this very much found me.
Beautiful. And that really leads on well to what I wanted to ask you about. In the foreword of the book, you talk about controlled perfection. And I read that and I was just like, yes. I can see in myself the controlled perfection, and in so many of the women around me. It's almost perfection on steroids. Isn't it? And when you think that perfection can't get any more kind of
limiting and enclosing, the controlled element of it just encapsulates it so well. Can you tell us a bit more about?
Yeah, I think, I've been a control freak for the longest for all sorts of reasons. And I think, going back to childhood, I grew up in a family which was very loving, but was very dysfunctional. And, so this desire to control things, I think started there. Because when there is instability around you, you do your best to create, you want to control outcomes. So I grew up with that. And I also grew up with high standards. My dad was very sort of, was very old school and strict and really he wanted the best for us, as both parents did. So, I was raised with that old school West Indian mentality, which was, I think I wrote in the book, we used to drive to school with Dad and he'd have us recite, the heights by great men reached and kept were not attained by sudden flight, but they, while their companions slept, were toiling upward in the night. So this was, and I still remember every word of that poem. That was the soundtrack. So yeah, it was very much about achieving and acquiring and when I got pregnant, I remember my dad said to me, now all you'll ever be is a statistic. And that was kind of so I think in that moment something shifted in me that was like, hell no, I'm going to be anything but that. But the problem with that is it was never enough. However much I achieved, I had this inbuilt mechanism that said, no, you're still not enough, more. And eventually that just exhausts you, and it detracts from your, takes away from your power, and it wrecks you. It takes you apart. It's not sustainable.
Yeah, and so many women have that, where even on a small scale, we're unable to celebrate those successes along the way.
Yeah. And I think also as women, we have this, we have this guilt, we have this constant guilt that we live with. We find it so difficult to do for ourselves without feeling guilty. We concentrate on our career and we feel guilty about not spending time with the kids. We spend time with the kids and we feel guilty about that. And you see it in women of all races, at all levels, despite their circumstances. And it has such an impact on our mental health, but also on our ability to thrive in our professional lives. Because what happens is, there's all sorts of statistics that show that in the workplace, if a man wants to apply for a job, he'll apply if he has half of the qualifications and accomplishments required. Whereas for us, we've got to have above and beyond before we'll even consider it. And then when we do get it, we start to have this imposter syndrome. So we're constantly feeling less than, and that's because of the conditioning that we're raised with. So there's everything is driven towards us never quite feeling like we've got to this magical place that doesn't exist.
Yeah, and then the media and companies, not that I'm against capitalism or anything, but they will then try to sell us those products on the premise that they will fix us because they're somehow broken, or they'll make us feel enough if we were to buy that lipstick or that handbag or whatever it might be. It's so funny that you talk about that statistic, because it was partly that got me into the work that I do now.
Wow.
Because I heard that and I was like, I know that to be true in my own life. That one, and also the story about, you can have a classroom of children, the teacher asks a question, and the girl in the room, who so would have been me, knows the answer, but she's sitting there on her hands, not putting her hand up. And then the little boy next to her, little Johnny, puts his hand up, and the teacher's like, oh yeah, what's the answer? And he says, what's the question, miss? And for me, it's those two examples that was like, okay, that's just slotted together so many things. And I see that played out for women of all ages, not kind of 5 years old in the classroom.
Yeah. And I think that, when it's a revelation when I think we know it, we know everything, don't we, conceptually, that, we can't get our validation from external sources. But when you really have an experience where you realize that, you really truly get that, everything shifts. And we're just so much more effective when we don't need it anymore. Yeah. It's nice to be celebrated. All of those things it's nice to be recognized. But when we no longer need it, there's just this liberation that frees us up just to kind of be who we are. And of course, when we're being who we are, we excel. We're at our best. All of our best work and it's all there. But it takes such courage just to decide not to conform to somebody else's idea of what we should be.
Yeah, and a lot of unlearning.
I call it stripping back. It's like stripping back our layers, and that's not always comfortable.
No. So in terms of a purpose-driven life, what is that?
Good question. What is a purpose-driven life? A purpose-driven life is the opposite to existing, for a start. It's where we are powered, our lives are powered by meaning. And we've got to a place where we know who we are and we know what we stand for. And so we know what we want. And then we're actively creating that, as opposed to letting life happen to us as if we are, victims of it and victims of circumstance and sort of reacting. It's a proactive way of life as opposed to a reactive one. And it's where, for me, joy and fulfillment, alignment, it's where we're so aligned with who we are that our lives become congruent. So we're no longer compartmentalized, being somebody at home and perhaps somebody else at work, because that's required. It's a sort of coming together. And the beauty is that when you achieve that alignment in your life, things start to flow in a way which you could never create through strategy or through investment or any of those external things. And so we can still be successful and we can create abundance and all of those things, but it's happening in a much more in a much more sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Organic and meaningful way. Yeah.
And your book feels like a guidebook to help you get there. You know how like some books will throw out those concepts and you're like, right, but how do I do it? And then you give guidance on how to achieve that. And then you give the permission as well, which I know that so many of us think we need the permission. And I'm not saying that we need it, but it's that kind of, that nudge, that gentle nudge that helps to instigate the change. That's what I feel like your book.
I tried really hard, and I think it would have been impossible for me to write a kind of self-help guide, because it's not who I am. I wanted to share through my experience. This was really me, my sort of coming out and just sharing. But I've for all of my practical success, what's been most transformational has been what's gone on behind the scenes, and that's all internal. And that's the bit that's the real gold dust, and that's what I wanted to share. That's why I wanted to do it in a way that was, here, this is this is what's happened to me, and therefore it can also happen for you. You don't have to wake up with that cloud over your head or feel trapped or feel conflicted. That there's another way, and it's really beautiful on the other side.
And that's what that permission piece is. So even when you just see somebody else doing something and sharing upon it, it opens up the possibilities. That's why I'm always so into talking about all of the women that I know in my network, because it opens up the possibilities when we can see it. Even with my little girl, she's only 4 years old, but I know as she meets other women, she's like, wow. Kind of, it opens up the realm of possibilities.
Yeah. And that's, that's why I wanted to be honest. And a lot of people have commented on how honest it is, because I guess it's unusual, but I saw an Alicia Keys quote which was recently, which was, didn't want to hide anymore. And I really relate to that. I think it was in reference to her makeup journey, and I still love my lip gloss. And do you know what I mean? I'm not going to stop wearing makeup anytime soon. But I really get where she's coming from. I'm not willing to, and there's so much in that. There's rather than it stepping out and being who you are, leading to exclusion, or not belonging or not fitting on what it does is you become to belong to yourself, and you start to really find your space and your groove, and in terms of business, your customers and your clients, the people that you really want to be serving and you want to be working with, and it all slots into place. But it starts with that courage to make that transition out, possibly, of a career or a relationship or whatever is not you. It's not for you anymore.
And it's that courage as well to go against the norm, isn't it? Because I know, like in my earlier career, and I started off in PR, and mainly PR, I started off in fashion. And where you talk about you have to be someone at work and then someone at home, and that was completely me, because I thought the real me wouldn't be acceptable in the world of fashion in the early 2000s. It just wasn't. Whereas now it feels like it's okay to show up.
Yeah, but I really feel we're in this time of like watershed where it's like people, I think more of us are realizing the power of us and the importance of being who we are. And we're starting to push. And you see that even in the corporate world where, I feel the power is so much more with the people than the corporations, in the sense that they're having to really look at their culture, their corporate culture. Otherwise they will lose employees. People won't want to work there. They won't stay because they're saying, well, hold on a minute, we don't feel included here, and we don't feel accepted. There's no opportunity for us to rise through the ranks. We want to be paid the same as men. And so there's this pushing of the way it's always been in so many different areas now. And I think that really starts from individuals waking up to, I want to be who I am, or I'm going to opt out, on all sorts of different levels, which is great, because it makes everybody thrives when we bring ourselves, right?
Yeah. And you see one person, you do it and you're like, yeah, I can do that. Mm-hmm. So definitely, I really feel it on a personal level, that owning your story and not hiding resonates so deeply with me. The moment that I stopped hiding, it was like I had renewed energy, because it's exhausting. Yeah. It's exhausting hiding. Yeah. It is. So definitely. There was something I really wanted to pick up in the book that was such a pleasant surprise that I had to read it twice. It was really late when I read it. I was in bed, needing to go to bed, but I was like, I need to read this chapter again. And it was where you talked about being mixed race, brought up in London, and the experience of your parents, and particularly your dad, who's from Jamaica, wasn't he? Mm-hmm. And kind of the legacy of slavery right up to him coming over in the 50s, and how that lends itself to a sense of not belonging.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was so much. There's so many different themes in this book, which all point back to this journey back to ourselves. And unpicking, as you described it, or stripping back, as I call it, to get back to the root, the core of who we are. And you've got this what society does, the way that we're conditioned. You've got the way that we do it to ourselves, and then you've got our families and our upbringing. And I think because my dad had passed, just from having that creates this exploration naturally, because you want to really understand your relative in a way that perhaps you didn't quite as deeply when they were alive. And so there was that. But certainly, my dad came here when he was very young. He was 19. He was part of the early Windrush generation, and, you know, instantly stepped into this environment where he didn't feel he belonged, where he was made to feel he didn't belong. And then when you were a child and that creates there's an energy with that.
Yeah.
And then as a child, and then you have my mum, who was a white English woman, 17 years junior to my dad. They come together at a time where interracial relationships and marriages are not okay. And there's all the hostility that comes with that from people, from society. And then you're a child born into that. And this feeling of not belonging is passed down from one generation to another. And it's not something that we talk about. You don't sit around the table discussing that, but it's there. It's there. And we have that, and we grow up with that. And so it's this unspoken need to fit, this feeling of less than, this feeling to somehow be, this need to be more than our white counterparts, or on, depending on where you live, our native counterparts. And it does us a disservice until we start to become aware of it. And it's deeper than, we now talk as a society about the importance of representation. I mean, Colourblind Cards was born out of that, but it's deeper than seeing visual representation and people who look like us in the workplace. It's much deeper than that. It's the language that our parents use around our need to work 10 times harder than the white person. It's all of it. It's be a doctor, a lawyer, or a teacher. Because those are the three careers that will earn you kudos and respect. Why? Because underneath the surface, somehow you don't deserve respect, or you're not worthy of respect, or you won't be seen to be worthy of respect. And there's a real hangover from an ancestral hangover, which I felt it important to talk about.
I am so glad that you did. It was such a surprise. Like, I didn't think you were going to go there. I honestly, when I picked up the book and I'd spoken to you beforehand, I'm lucky enough to have a pre-copy of it. I thought I knew the kind of thing that I would be getting, and I did not expect that. And it made me emotional to read it, because it's something that I'm still working through now. That kind of surprised me. That belief of having to work 10 times harder is something that has constantly been there. It was like the narrative to my childhood that has continued with me, and then I perpetuate that for myself. And as I'm doing this work, I can see the belief. It's almost like the light has turned on, and I can see the belief and I can see the story. And I'd kind of unpicked it with various friends and conversations that I'd had, but to see it written in print in a book, it was just like, I'm not mad.
I felt, I really felt good writing that. There's certain parts of this book that I really particularly relished writing, and perhaps because I hadn't seen it, I don't know, but I enjoyed that. It's like you're going through a chocolate box and you get to a particularly good one, and it's like, I'm enjoying sharing this, putting it out there, because it's necessary, and it's just the truth, and it's an important conversation for us to have.
Really important. It's important in being able to educate everybody. Yeah. And it's important for anyone whose journey it impacts, anybody who's feeling it, then it's that intersectionality that we are hearing more about in terms of the intersectionality of feminism, of race and gender. In the self-development world, we don't hear about it. And some of the concepts that I read about and I talk upon, some of them jar with me, if I'm honest. Because it's like, well, you're saying that this is a belief and a story, but this feels like my reality. Yes. Even if I try and change the story, when I walk out the four walls of my house, it's kind of my reality. And so it's something that I've personally been kind of battling with in my mind part consciously, part unconsciously. And this has just gone so kind of given me some headway in unraveling it. And I know it's a conversation that I'm going to be continuing with friends. We've started it already. It's brilliant.
Thank you. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's about, I think, within this space, this personal development space, how can we explore, this journey back to ourselves without touching on, and I think, again, it's this is why we need to have, it's the same argument, this is why we need to have different people with different experiences and different backgrounds. We need more of them in this personal development space so that they can bring their particular journey to the fore, because there'll be other people who resonate with that. And it isn't just for people of color. It's for everybody. We all gain from understanding each other better because we're all part of one. So we need the different pieces of the jigsaw puzzle in order to understand ourselves better. Because if you were raised in a family where your parent was prejudiced in some way, and you've picked that up, just that understanding of that person's experience, it's good for the whole.
Exactly, because sometimes it feels within the current conversations there's this big piece missing, and it's a big piece that adds to our wellness and to our well-being. And it's everybody's God-given right to have that level of wellness and well-being. But if we're ignoring these massive kind of realities, concepts, ideas, exactly, then we're having half a conversation. And even now, as I'm talking this out, it's like something has been jarring with me on even the work that I do, if I'm going to be completely honest, in the whole world. Something has been jarring, and this has been part of it. It's that we're still not, in a sense, being able to bring our whole selves to the table if we're not having the whole conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There wasn't anything that I wasn't going to do a book like this without, and still there was nothing, and as you go through it, you'll see there's nothing I felt I held back for my understanding today. A year from now, 5 years from now, I'm sure I'll have slightly different perspectives. And even through writing the book, there's growth that's taken place and things I see slightly differently. It's fascinating. But I just wanted to be true to where I am today and share that without, filtering anything.
No, thank you for doing that. And I just wanted to go on to the book. You've been really vulnerable. How does that feel now that by the time this recording goes out, the book will be out there, but I know you've been doing interviews and kind of talking about it, and it's in the hands of lots of people. How does it feel? I know that Brené Brown talks about the vulnerability hangover, and when I first heard that concept from her, I was like, thank you. Because I know that when I've been open about things, that I'll have that kind of moment of, and it is a bit of a vulnerability hangover, and I know what I need to do.
Yeah.
Kind of the equivalent of try up.
Definitely.
How do you feel?
So my commissioning editor at Hay House was amazing, because she said to me, just before you submit this, and she said this early on, just before you submit this manuscript, you're going to panic, you're going to think it's a terrible book, and you'll probably have a bit of a meltdown. So I was prepared for that. Yeah. But obviously this is, I think that's a kind of standard author set of circumstances. For me, I have been very vulnerable, and there was questioning, at all sorts of different junctures. Am I saying too much? Am I leaving myself exposed? What people will think I'm mad? But in the end, the reward, the liberation, the way that I'm just like it's summer and I got the roof down and I haven't got big coats on, and I'm just free. I'm free, and what's beautiful is the people, circumstances, whatever that isn't for me will fall away, and what will be left and what I'll attract is what's right for me and meant for me. And that feeling of alignment is so precious, and the miracles that the sort of the synchronicity that starts to happen within that space is you can't fail to be in awe at. I'm just in awe. I'm so in awe at my last 18 months. And that is all a result of me, just doing it, just going for it and moving through the fear and the doubts, as much as they've really been quite strong at times. When I first, I remember when my publicist first started, one of the first pieces of feedback, and I won't tell you which title it was, but it was one that I thought, gosh, my writing's a really good fit. It's a magazine that I love. I thought perfect. And for me, it was like a no-brainer because I've done stuff with them with my PR hat for years. And she came back and she said, they've said it's a bit too spiritual. And I was devastated because I was like, too spiritual. Like, what? It's the first time anyone said that to me in my career, for obvious reasons. And it was a real kind of woe moment. Like, what am I doing here? Are people going to think that I have just lost my mind? But once I got over that, I just had the realization that we're all in different places and we all have different experiences, and therefore we look out of different windows, and some things will feel and sound far out. And that's okay. And again, who is meant to get you will get you. And yeah, it's an adventure. It's great.
Those people will be going, oh, I love the spiritual. That was me.
Yeah. And reading chapters again.
Exactly. And one of the stories that has really stuck out at me was when you were invited to Downing Street.
Yeah. So that, yeah. So I'd gone to Downing Street, must have been about 27. And it was off the back of launching Colourblind, and we'd got the cards into the high street, which had been the mission. And I was one of 10 entrepreneurs invited along to contribute to this roundtable discussion about building a more entrepreneurial young Britain. And, I walked through the doors and was kind of completely overwhelmed by being there, because it was such a juxtaposition from, the early part of my adult life and where I'd started out as a mum at 17. And yes, I sort of went into the loo to get myself together and went back to the table. And, I was already successful at that point. I'd enjoyed this really, really exciting media career. And, in terms of the way society views success, I'd done well. Started Colourblind, it had been groundbreaking. So I deserved to be there. But because of this narrative and this perception that I had of who I was, despite this external success, I still had this really limiting view of myself and who I was. Inside, I didn't feel I belonged to be there. And as a result, when they moved around the table and asked for everybody's contribution, what all of this sort of intelligent contribution that I could have made, those words escaped me. I didn't have the words. And instead what came out was the idea that I could basically be a case study, of why people fall outside of the system. And it was really kind of dimmed my light and diminished myself, because I half expected others to be thinking, why is she here? So I thought, I'll dim my light before somebody else does. And I think we do that often, all the time, in all sorts of ways. And that's why I wanted to share that story.
That was such a powerful story, because as I was reading it, I could see how so many women could plop themselves into it. And maybe they weren't sitting in Downing Street on a round table with the Prime Minister, but even if it was a conversation they were having in a coffee shop with a friend, or a conversation around the boardroom at work.
Yeah.
There are so many scenarios where we're dimming our light. And my big thing is about, I say at the end of the podcast, go out there and shine your light, because that's what the world needs. And it is turning it around onto those scenarios where we're dimming our own light.
Sorry. I think that's the most, I think we do that. In fact, I know we do that more than others do. You know, we dim our own light more than others dim our light. Because we set the trend for how we're received. You know, we set the precedent. We say, this is who I am, and people just meet us at our frequency.
Yep.
So again, this is why we have to do this stripping back. Otherwise, we just continue to attract this way of being treated or viewed, or, you know, situations and circumstances, because we don't realize that it's all about our own frequency and our own self-view and our relationship with who we are.
It's our own stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it will, what that story showed me is how we are radiating it out, and then we see it reflected back on us. But it's a lot of the time it's because we've radiated it out without even realizing. I mean, I know in that scenario you talk about how you did realize at the time.
Afterwards. Oh, yeah, I did. But, you know, I wasn't asked back.
I didn't want the case study back.
To be fair, the party in power just won't change, which may have something to do with it. I don't know. But yeah, you know, it was the main thing is that we eventually wake up and we sort of start to see, and then you see the pattern, then you see the other areas that you do it in.
Yeah, I found that so interesting. This is a bit of a kind of a side sweeping question, but as I was reading, it was just something that I was really curious to know. But this journey that you've been on, has it impacted your parenting?
Such a nice question. Yes, it has. It really has, because, you know, one of the revelations for me has been really coming to realize that I am not my identity. I am not my what I do for a living. I'm not just this body. You know, who I am is much deeper than that. And raising my daughter, who's now 19. You know, you raise your kids, or the normal way, society's norm is this outlook where we mold our children. You know, we raise them and we sort of impart our knowledge, and we set them up, and we want them to be secure and safe and happy, of course. But we want these things for them, and therefore we raise them with that outlook. And the switch, so with little Jensen, who's 6 now, I have a very different perspective, which is about he is already, the essence of who he is already there. And my job is to create a space with parameters where he is able to be all of who he is, and just blossom and thrive and grow into who he already is, to be more of him. You know, it's not about molding. It's about me creating space for him to do him and be him and feel safe and confident to just be him, without me putting my own predisposed ideas. So yeah, that's changed. And actually, I mean, I love being a mum, but it's a slightly different. It's a different relationship, actually. Both, but, you know, beautiful, but yeah, different.
It's interesting. Do you ever find within that role it feels like you're trying to protect them, not from the world, but protect him so that he can be more of himself before kind of society gets in there?
Yeah, there is that, but it's I guess it's a kind of empowering. You want to empower them to be, you know, to revel in their uniqueness, and explain that, you know, it's I'm still working it out, Nicola. I think it's a dance between, you know, you want to allow your children to have their own journey, so you don't want to bog too many kind of deep concepts or ideas or too much too soon, because they have to work out and they have to have challenges, because that's part of their journey. But yeah, I think the best way that we can teach them is just by being it, right? Just by being who we are. You know, it's that integrity, you know, those things, like, you know, when I'm having a sort of a morning where I might snap, for example, I will always say, sorry, I was in a bit of I didn't get enough sleep last night, darling. I didn't mean to respond like that. So that he gets that that's the way to be. You know, it's okay. You don't have to be afraid to be vulnerable and admit that you were wrong. Like, that's the right way to. So I think it's in those kind of.
Yeah, you're right. It's in that example, isn't it, of just being it, that they learn the most. So, what are your do you have any daily rituals or a practice that helps to keep you in your purpose?
Yeah, my connection to myself is now my priority. It really is, and that's a huge shift from a couple of years ago, because everything flows well off the back of that, and it goes way beyond this idea of self-care. It's more than that. It's for me, meditation has become a daily practice for me, and sometimes it's just a couple of minutes. I might be sitting in a taxi and close my eyes, but just that kind of centering. And then things like the gratitude list. I know, it's so overused now, but it works for me because it's, having spent so many years where I'd wake up and instantly feel this sort of darkness. I wasn't happy. I was plowing through, but I wasn't happy. So now that I have this newfound serenity in my life, I want to maintain that. And so just keeping my focus on all that there is to be, there's so much to be grateful for. Keeping my focus actively on those things is really sacred for me. So I do, my 10 things in the morning, and at night I'll work through mentally, and I actually write them down. And at night I'll work through mentally and just decide on the one that stood out. Yoga was one of the things that really helped with my grief. It really did. It got me through caring for Dad. It got me through the aftermath. And now it's like, it's part of me, so much so I want to really go and learn it and really understand it. Yeah. I've learned lots on the yoga mat. It's been amazing. And that's quite a new joy. And yeah, just writing, just writing. It's anything, and cooking, actually, all the sort of little things that make me present, and they're all new. I laugh and say, because I raised Monet with about three different things that I could cook. Honestly, it was a good thing that my parents lived close by, because she literally would have been on stewed chicken and bolognese on rotation. Whereas now, I'm cooking things that I've never heard of. But, I've got a bit more space and time, but I've crafted my life that way, which is nice.
Yeah. And then just to wrap up, so you've mentioned that you've started on the next book, which is exciting. What else is there as you continue on this journey? What else do you see on your vision? Do you see anything on there?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to keep writing. I've got probably 3 or 4 different book ideas. I've started writing one, but I'm going to keep writing. And there's been a transition for me from, my traditional PR agency setup to working more, one-on-one with women on a weekly basis to help them, drawing on my 20 years of PR expertise, to help them embrace visibility and to step out with their purpose-driven business. So it's working in a different way, one-to-one, no staff. It's just working in a way that suits my life now, but where I can still draw on my professional expertise, but with everything else that I've picked up along the way. I'm planning a retreat in Jamaica in February next year, which is exciting. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I will do. That's amazing.
Anything that just feels right, and it's all coming together. It's but I'm enjoying not having it all worked out. I'm really comfortable with that, and having the space to just let's see what's meant. I have no doubt in my mind that it will fall into place. And that's new.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It has been a pleasure to speak to you.
And you, my love. Thank you. And good luck with the podcast. And I'm so proud of you and enjoying watching you just like blossom.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for those kind words. I really appreciate it. So guys, that is the end of the first Dream and Do conversation. I really hope you enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed recording and talking and chatting with Jessica. There are a lineup of great conversations with women that are dreaming and doing in action coming up. So please stay tuned. And other than that, I will see you really soon. Thank you for listening. It is so appreciated. If you like what you heard, help your girl out by subscribing on iTunes and leaving a review. And I'll be picking out a reviewer each month to receive a very special affirmation card and print pack. So get over there to get yours. Sending you love and light as always, and I will see you really soon.